What's going on, everybody? This is Jerome Moore, host and creator of Deep Dish Conversations. And firstly, I want to say thank you for all love and support, and thank you for exploring the perspectives of social change with me on this platform. I want to encourage you all to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast listen platform. And make sure you give us a 5-star rating if you're loving the Deep Dish Conversations. I appreciate all of the support again. I hope you all enjoy this episode. All right, here we go. Amanda, how's it going?
I'm doing great. So happy to be here.
I'm ecstatic. Like, I don't know where this is going to go, but wherever it goes, I know it's going to be something amazing that we all can appreciate and like take a lot away from.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be invited to be here. I mean that sincerely. Just looking at some of the other ones, you know, Jackie Sims and Jamel Campbell Gooch. The fact you would even consider me in their same company is such an honor.
You know, we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different experiences. And I think everybody's experience and journey is important, you know. And just for me, maybe I'm like nosy and I just want to know about everybody's experience and journey. But I just like exploring people and humanities, and like maybe other people do too.
Mm-hmm.
And
why do you think I'm a psychotherapist? I get to hear everyone's stories, and I am endlessly fascinated, like you, by everybody's story. I always want to know what's behind what makes people tick.
Yeah. And so maybe we'll find out what makes you tick today. Maybe, I don't know.
We'll see.
So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, where you're from, your background.
Sure. I'm originally from New England. I grew up in Connecticut, but we moved around quite a bit. I like to consider myself bicultural. I have a father whose family was originally from very rural middle Georgia, and a mother who came from Italian immigrants from the Northeast. And there were two very different faith traditions, two very different cultural traditions, and so it was very different experience of both of those parts of the extended family. Lovely people on both sides.
And so where did you see like those cultural differences kind of have its challenges growing up?
I would say the role of women to a certain extent. The Southern Baptist Church that my father grew up in was very hellfire and brimstone, which was very different from the old Catholic priests in the Northeast doing their thing. And the food, it's just a very different experience of life.
Right.
And as somebody who, as you know, with communication, is that you're allowed to be expressive. You're allowed to let people know that you've had a bad day. But here especially, I think, for women, but also for men, you have to put a smile on your face and always act like everything's okay. And that was never a part of my upbringing in the Northeast. Like if you were having a bad day or you didn't like somebody, you know, you said it out loud.
Y'all are way more expressive in the Northeast.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
And so, growing up with that, like kind of this bicultural upbringing, which one kind of tended to dominate more than the other, you think?
I would say the Italian, because I lived up there longer than I had lived in the South. And being around my mother's family and being part of the Northeast. So I would think, even though I've lived most of my life in the South, that I still more identify with that kind of culture.
Okay, so how about professionally? What do you do? Tell us what you do professionally.
I am a psychotherapist in private practice.
Okay.
I've worked for nonprofits and community mental health most of my career, but now I'm in private practice.
So what inspired you to get into that profession?
Oh, now that's a long story. I don't know if you're ready for that one.
Oh, we can abbreviate it.
Okay, I'll do my best.
If you can do your best, yeah. No.
Actually, I became involved in the Vanderbilt Prison Project. That's what brought me to Nashville, was to go to Vanderbilt for college. And I got very involved in the prison project. And after college, I moved to Atlanta to be near that part of the family, and ended up working as a parole officer in inner city Atlanta. And I saw so much mental illness, I would say 95% of my clients were people of color. So I immediately, just based on the ratio, saw that something was amiss there, and saw people who had been failed at every step of their lives, from kindergarten on, if not from when they were born. And that actually was exactly what inspired me, and that made the goal of being a psychotherapist come into existence, because I wanted to help people before they got to the point that they were going to prison.
This is you gave me a lot to work with. Mental health, parole, like just the police system in general. Mm-hmm. Where do we go from here?
Ooh, let me tell you. The carceral system is a system that is built on white supremacy. Mm-hmm. It is, I think, very much intentionally designed to keep poor people and people of color trapped in their circumstances. And it is a profit motive that absolutely needs to be ended. There should be no profit motive for incarcerating people. There should be no profit motive for the school to prison pipeline, as you know, we've worked on. And it's just got to be dismantled. And it's not going to be dismantled until people come to see those systems for what they really are. And I am a little more heartened lately than I was in the 90s and the early aughts by feeling that my white friends and family had a completely irrational trust and belief in a system that was deeply corrupt.
So when did you realize, because you got into the system,
Mm-hmm.
On the parole side, when did you realize, like, oh shit, like, yeah, this is, like, I didn't know, like, racism and white supremacy did damage or did harm, or maybe I didn't even aware of those terms really before you got into that sector?
Right. I'd have to go back a little bit farther than that. Coming from the Northeast, I lived in a predominantly white suburb of New York. But because of the proximity to New York, it was actually a pretty diverse place in a lot of ways. You know, my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Foster, was black, and she was very well respected in the school. She's a brilliant woman, one of the best teachers I've ever had. And so there were not a lot of people of color, but the people of color in town, I think, were very much respected. Sometimes they were specifically selected to go to the schools in our town because they were academically amazing. They all went on to Ivy League universities. But my best friend in ninth grade, who's still like a sister to me, was from the Caribbean, from Trinidad. Some of my dearest friends from today were refugees from South America, from Chile, political asylum here in the United States. So I had exposure to people of different cultures, I think, in a way that not a lot of white folks in the South do. They live in, I think, much more homogenous neighborhoods, much more homogenous churches.
Right. Segregation.
But
essentially, yeah.
Do you know what it was? It was actually early, to answer your question, early on in my career, traveling through Atlanta and Ponce de Leon Avenue. I don't know if you're familiar with Atlanta. It is a pretty big thoroughfare in Atlanta. It runs east to west. And the neighborhood, like here, was very, not affluent. I don't want to say that they were rich, but it was just sort of like a middle-class neighborhood. And then, like, you crossed Ponce de Leon, and it was very neglected. Right. And I went back to the office, and I asked my boss, what is the deal with Ponce? And he asked me, and I said, it's white and middle class on one side, and it's poor and black on the other. How can there be such a stark difference from one side of the street to the other? And that's when I learned about redlining, which I had not known about. I was 22 or 23, and I was just stunned. And then I was embarrassed that I was so stunned that I hadn't known about that practice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably still don't know a lot about redlining and it's like the residual like effects it had to this day on
Absolutely.
communities, on voting, um, property value, all of that stuff.
All of that. I mean, we still have cases today. I was just reading one 2 or 3 days ago of black families having to enlist some white friend or white family member to show their house, and their assessment doubles. I mean,
I seen that same one. They like basically covered up that like it was a black family
yes.
house that had a yeah. That's
In
crazy.
20, almost 22, that could still be and people very often I find don't know their own history. They don't know their own 20th century history.
Right.
They really don't teach a lot of 20th century history, I think, in the entire country and especially in the South, about things like the GI Bill and
Right.
the things that the black veterans didn't receive when they got home, and that lifted a lot of people out of poverty, people who could buy a house or go to
Right.
school or start a business, being able to get very low cost mortgages
Wow.
back after post World War II,
Like,
which were denied to people
yeah,
in black neighborhoods.
Black folks couldn't even get life insurance at
Nope.
one time. I mean, that's how many people build generational wealth, right?
Absolutely.
You have those $200,000, $300,000 policies.
Absolutely.
And, a parent dies or something like that, and that wealth can be passed on. Nope,
Absolutely.
not here.
Not here.
So, wow, okay. I'm getting excited. So, you mentioned just in your own friends and your family, just the lack of perspective and awareness about white supremacy, racism, and all those things. What have you been able to do as a white woman, as an ally, which we'll get into a little more too, to kind of confront white supremacy and racism from a personal perspective and also from a communal perspective about those who may just not be aware? You have to be like, oh, that's kind of racist or discriminatory, don't you think?
Right. I remember being in high school and saying in a group, we were in a class, and for some reason we were just talking, and maybe the teacher stepped out, and we were talking about crime and things like that. And I said that a black person driving through a white neighborhood was in way more danger than a white person driving through a black neighborhood. And I was completely laughed at. And so just from that point forward, as you know me, taking it upon myself to point out to people along the way how distorted and irrational their conceptions are of race, of black people, of things that they don't know anything about. And that's part of white supremacy, is it not?
It is.
Is that idea, I always say, I hope to be celebrated one day as much as a mediocre white man is. It's like, you have to be like twice as good as them to get half the respect, right? So pointing it out when I saw it was definitely a big part of it, especially as a parole officer. It was a very progressive time. I mean, we were trying to do what we could to help people get, I help people get mental health treatment. I help them get substance abuse treatment, and really, really made an effort to help people get out of the system, get the hooks of the system out of them. I tried to free people. I very much early on did a lot of reading on social activism, everything from Karl Marx and the old philosophers of our relationship to labor, on up through Malcolm X and Fred Hampton and everything like that, and very much believed that nobody's free until we're all free, and so I don't consider myself free.
Did you get any pushback? What did that pushback look like when you tried to educate, make people aware of some of the actions and some of the things that they, mannerism or white supremacy or racism that they was carrying around, whether it's psychological or like literally physically carrying around.
Right. There was an incident one time after a U2 concert. I had gone with a coworker who very generously gifted me the ticket. And we were in downtown Atlanta at 2 a.m. And a woman came around the corner and almost hit him, but of course he and his friends were intoxicated and stumbling around, so she was in the right. And she honked or yelled at him, get out of the way, or something like that. And they used the N-word. They screamed the N-word at her in the middle of Atlanta. And so I didn't feel like having a conversation with somebody who was drunk. I got on the MARTA and home and away from him as soon as possible. But we had a conversation about it, to say the least. And it did not go well. And he could not hear me. I mean, I thought it went beyond being defensive. And I think that's the thing I don't have to tell you. You see in people when you challenge their beliefs around these things. This is how it's so baked into the system. It's how we're raised to perceive the world. It is a cult.
Right.
And it's very much like a narcissistic, abusive relationship, I think, a lot of the times that the white supremacy has with the black community. Scapegoating them, projecting blame onto them, gaslighting, and saying this is your fault and actually you have it better than we should actually treat you. All of that is perfectly paralleled with an abusive relationship and the relationship that you would have if you were part of a cult. And so it's not even like a defensiveness. It's not even like this, oh, well, not me and my friends, we're not racist. It is literally, you're challenging somebody's identity.
Right.
And it really is like the Matrix. It is really sort of unhooking yourself from this machine and realizing that everything you've been taught is false. It's just, it is Wizard of Oz type stuff, that there is no great wizard. Right. It's just this pitiful man behind a curtain trying to keep himself up at the top of some sick pyramid.
And so I'm going to ask you a question. And I don't think it's a question I've ever asked before. It's a two-part question. The first part is it harder to navigate being a white ally or trying to get other white folks to understand their white supremacist racism ways and mannerisms?
The latter. I find it very easy to be a white ally. That comes with a certain degree of shame for the ways in which I think I bought into it and probably white-splained stuff at points in my own life. And I don't feel like we've done enough, white allies. We simply haven't, to confront white folks and really start dismantling some of these systems. It's not just interpersonally. I think interpersonally, a lot of white people do just fine, but it's helping them to see how really rotten and corrupted a lot of our systems are. And that is very challenging. And I have received a lot of negative feedback about that. And people who know me well know that I have a history of studying like policing in undergraduate and graduate school. This isn't just like some emotional reaction or something of the day. Like all of this this has been a conversation for me since the mid-'80s. Nothing about it is new. So the latter, most definitely. I've been really stunned by how welcomed I have been as an ally, and I don't know if that's because I am a fairly authentic person. I don't have much of a filter, so it's not hard to figure out who I am or what. I still don't know exactly why that is, but no, it has been extraordinarily difficult. Like at times, it has really gotten to me.
What was it? Can you speak on that a little more about a specific time? Or just how just the rage?
Yeah, it is rage. It is rage. And maybe it is because I've never been somebody who has been particularly threatened when I've learned new information. It hasn't been fun at times to be like, ooh, I was I was wrong about that. You
Right.
know, we all like to believe that we're right about everything. But it hasn't been that difficult to make that pivot. Okay, new information, you know. But it seems to me to be a betrayal. And as you know, I'm a fairly anti-capitalistic person, and I believe that too is by design, that we are designed to be alienated from one another. And so I spend a lot of my time on social media. I spend a lot of my time with my friends and family, trying to bring a sense of class consciousness and a sense of like, we don't need to be alienated from one another. They're whispering in our ears, you know, black people are criminals, they're scary and dangerous, you know, and they're whispering in y'all's ears, they hate you, they want, you know, and none of it's true. I mean, we have so much more, I know that sounds so trite, but we do have so much more in common than we have in differences. But a lot of my white friends and white family have just never spent time in black homes. They've never spent time with people, and I've had the benefit of that. I've been in some of the poorest homes in this country. I've done community service projects with black people in the Mississippi Delta that were living in conditions out of the 19th century, and big guests in their homes, and just the loveliest people. And having that perspective, and just all the homes I went into as a parole officer, I spent more time with everybody's moms and aunties and grandmas, and
I think that's one of our biggest barriers that we have, especially in the South, right? Where we're all in our our bubble.
Our bubble.
Essentially, we all in our bubble, and so unless you, as you learn, and unless you have some parents or somebody that's going to really make it an intentional effort to expose you to different cultures, so you can garner that perspective, it's very easy for us to be closed-minded and really believe what, depending on what side you're on oh, this is true or this is not true, or this is false or this is not false. And so that intentionality that you've had, but also others need to have, to change that perspective, at least learn and be open to somebody, bro. And if you're wrong, like you said, somebody gotta do this self-reflect. Why was I thinking that way? But at least, but that's authentic and honest, and people can accept that. Okay, you was thinking that way. You're trying to do the self-work. You're trying to do the self-healing, and so you can be better, and then essentially, be an ally, be a better ally.
Absolutely.
Because it's a journey, right?
Yeah. So, I'll give you an example. When I worked at juvenile court for 2 years, I was a caseworker for truancy cases. And I saw a lot of cases involving black children who were recipients of special ed services. And so I don't know if you're familiar with the school system, but if you're in special education, you have what's called an individual education plan, an IEP. And, it has the goals for the child, and you review them. Well, when a child gets in trouble, and I don't know if it's still this way, but, somehow is in trouble in school, as they decide the discipline, they have to have what's called a manifestation determination. Is this behavior a manifestation of the child's special need, right?
Right.
And what I found over and over and over again is that white children were treated as if when they had the IEP and the manifestation determination, as if it were a mental health issue, which it almost always was to some degree or another. And that most of my black children, who had most of them some serious trauma issues, were treated as a behavioral issue. And the zeal with which school officials would try to suspend and expel these children, thereby funneling them into the school to prison pipeline, was awful. And so I started showing up at the IEP meetings and making sure that these children were being offered the same services and the same testing. Because at that point, you also test them. They had 2 different designations at the time, emotionally disturbed or severely emotionally disturbed. And if they qualified for that, then they received certain services within school, maybe being moved to what was called a moderate intervention program, MIP, fragile class, where they didn't have to be, in the general population. Or with one of my students that I worked with who had a horrific history of trauma, I got her permission to just change classes sort of like a minute after because you know what it's like in a middle school, everybody in the hallway, she just couldn't, with her PTSD, she couldn't handle it. And once we got that, what's called a 504 modification for her, she was able to get back into school. She just could not handle being in a tight space with a bunch of other kids. But looking back on that, I think I was too bossy with those children's parents. Right. I should have been more of an educator and a support system. But I think I told them what to do too much, thinking I was doing that to try to help their child, but it wasn't respectful.
So I've been having conversations with some of my white friends that's in community organizing, or just wanted to build power in community, in that community being like the black or brown community, communities that they don't come from.
Right.
And they have shared with me just some struggles of navigating how to be an ally.
Yes.
Making sure they're not too bossy. Making sure they're, not that white male that thinks they know everything, or that white woman that feels like she knows what's right or not what's right, or that type of thing. And that's something, as a black man, I can't I don't understand that. And so I want to take this opportunity for you to give suggestions or things if you've learned in your journey as an ally on how to the best navigate ally situations where you're not projecting your whiteness on the situation overbearingly.
Right.
I mean, understanding how to, navigate that. And it may be some situations you'll never probably be able to navigate, depending who's in leadership, right?
Absolutely.
But making sure that you are, doing the best you can and practicing the best ally type of situation methods that you can.
Well, I don't know the answer to that because I don't think I'm there yet. I make mistakes all the time and think about it later and say, oh, why did I say that? Why did I do that? I think one of the, if not the most important, one of the most important things is that these things have to be Black-led. These efforts, no matter how well-meaning we are, they have to be led by the people who are most affected by the problem. There's been this just persistent disrespect of people, especially along class lines, that they don't know their own situation. They need to be assessed and told what their issues are. And, whether it's a white savior situation or just very well-meaning people, it just has to be led. And credible messengers, we're working on mental health crisis response, and people thinking that just anybody can go into a mental health situation. That I'm just thrilled to hear. And, this paradigm of, people that people in crisis know are going to be the best people to help manage that crisis. So I would say taking a back seat, just being, there's an old expression about, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. I'm really happy to be an Indian because I don't know better. I just don't. And recognizing what you don't know and having some humility about that as well, and not trying to separate yourself from your friends and family that don't get it. Oh my God, you don't get it. We still don't get it. We still have so long to go. But feeling that camaraderie with people and feeling like these things hurt us all.
Right. Yeah. We're all affected by it.
We're all affected by it.
The reason I ask that because there are some really, like yourself, really intelligent white people, people that are not of color, that really want to like help build. And that it's a hurt to the ego a lot of times because they know they're intelligent. Like, and we might even know that, right? But like being able, like you said, to take that back seat and say, okay, let me check my ego. Let me understand, like, this is not my fight. Even though I want to be a part of it, this is not my fight. This is not my issues. And I really want to get in there, but you gotta like suppress that a little bit,
right?
And or find a better way to navigate and let your resources, your talents be known, so you know you can be pulled in. But I know that has to be difficult at times.
I think it is extraordinarily difficult for other people. I have not found that to be particularly difficult. The reason that I'm so passionate about it is because I want to be that credible messenger to fellow white people. Because it's so easy to be dismissed unless you have some sort of experience, right? So part of the reason that I want to be involved is that they can't dismiss me. I know that all this, especially, you know, you and I have worked around criminal justice issues. They can't dismiss me. I'm a former law enforcement officer. If I say something about mental health, they can't dismiss me. I'm a psychotherapist with a master's degree in mental health. I just feel like I'm Liam Neeson. You know, I have a certain set of skills. And so I feel like I'm a credible messenger with regard to other people. And so I feel an obligation because I'm in such a unique situation. Where I've seen so many different perspectives. You know, I've been on, you know, every side in every home, seeing everything as it's broken, you know, seeing things happen in real time, that I need to use my voice, but I need to use my voice with other white people.
Man, I'm ready to play this back right now. No, like, I hope people are really like chiming in because this is I'm excited. Thank you, Amanda.
I am so honored that you would even want to interview me.
No, thank you. Do you feel that we could overcome? And this is kind of like a loaded question, and this is dependent on where your mind goes. It can be different perspectives on this. Do you think, as a society, as a country, you know, of the United States, that we can overcome racism and white supremacy?
That's not a difficult question. That's why you thanked me before you hit me with the big one. You were flattering my ego there. And they're like, how do we solve white supremacy, Amanda? Well, as you and I have discussed, it's not like this everywhere in the world. And that the experience of being a black person abroad, and that's why I'm so excited about your Black Youth Abroad program. It's just wonderful. Is that it's just, it doesn't have to be like this. It's not like this is everywhere in the world, right? It's not like every white person everywhere grows up in a culture where they feel superior just by virtue of their skin color. But I've got to tell you, again, this is a conversation I've been having since the mid-'80s. Social media has pierced that bubble. And I know that a lot of ugliness has come out, and I despise what just hate and nastiness has been exchanged, but I feel like it's like an infection that needed to be lanced, you know what I'm saying? And the message is starting to get through to people. They're starting to wake up. They're starting, I think, with, and it's horrible that it's taken this, but with actually getting to see these police killings and being like, oh my, he wasn't aggressive at all in that video. And it's like, yeah, this is what we've been trying to tell you, is that people are being murdered for no reason. I have more hope now. I know that sounds strange, than I have in my life. I wasn't sure that we would make any progress on it. And I think that social media has really been able to pierce those bubbles that we talked about and get the message through to people. And I see a lot of soul searching going on. I see a lot of people starting to allow themselves to get past that defensiveness and that like, oh, that's me, you know, see. And I'll be honest with you, the whole Karen thing, I think, has been a wake up for white women. I'm going to be honest with you. I have asked for people's managers' names and numbers more times than I can imagine. Probably less so with black people, but I always thought that I didn't want to bug them. It wasn't their problem. It was a policy of the store or what have you that I had a problem with. So I didn't want to, take up their time.
Right.
But I think a lot of white women have seen those videos and seen the havoc that it creates in the.
Somebody can die.
Yes. Especially with the police. Now, when I say Karen, I'm talking about, in a store asking to see the manager. But I think a lot of white women who have called the police did not realize that they were putting anybody in danger. And now they do. And I know that they're not making those calls the way that they used to. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So I am more hopeful than I ever have been. But I would be lying if I said I thought we could. It's so baked into everything.
Yeah, it is. And that's the systemic part of it. It's just literally just the foundation of every single facet of this our life.
Absolutely.
And it affects us all on different levels, on different spectrums, but we all wrapped up into it.
Yes.
And it's just the United States of America. Oh my gosh.
It's a lie.
It's
all one big Ponzi scheme, isn't it?
Yeah, the United States have done a masterful job of just manipulating and just conditioning everybody.
The cult of America.
It
is so similar to those same dynamics as you think you found this wonderful thing and you believed your whole life that this is a wonderful thing, and you find out it's this deeply destructive, corrupt, it's not what you have been told your whole life that it is.
Right. And even with the social media, even with the things being on camera, people are still having a hard time conceptualizing racism and white supremacy is a real thing. and still trying to isolate themselves from that reality. It's mind blowing.
It is mind blowing.
And so what can community do as a collective, all of us, right? To try to best combat what's going on, these critical social issues that we all deal with on different spectrums. What can community do? And from your perspective, just suggestions to combat this.
Right. I've tried a couple of things over the years. I remember when I was in community mental health, I wanted to do a mixed play group between the mothers that we served in our with our community programs, and maybe some of the mothers who were volunteers. Not because I thought that the white volunteers from West Nashville could help mentor those mothers, which is why I never did it, because that's what the only thing people would agree to, is because I thought it would be a wonderful way to get some of those women into people's homes. And see them with their children and see how much we have in common. I mentioned going to Mississippi, and I stayed with a lady out in the middle of nowhere. Oh my God, it was so rural. Named Betty Ann, who welcomed us into her home. And I sat down with Betty Ann, and we had so much in common. And here is this woman, this poor black woman in Mississippi, and here's, this college student from New England, and we had so much in common, and just being a guest in her home and being a recipient of her generosity and her wisdom I think would be a wonderful experience for a lot of people. And so I suggested the mixed play group, but I think really we need to be in each other's homes. I know COVID makes that incredibly difficult, but spending time with each other.
Right.
And I don't think that necessarily goes because I think Black people are subjected to white culture, daily. I think y'all don't have nearly the need for it, but I absolutely believe that it would do everybody a lot of good to spend some time in neighborhoods. I remember going to a conference in Chicago, and white people were like, "You're driving to Chicago?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm driving to Chicago by myself. I'm going to a conference." And they're like, "Downtown Chicago?" I was like, "Yeah." And then it was like, oh, it took me a minute.
Yeah.
I've been in every Black neighborhood in Atlanta. I've been in every Black neighborhood in Nashville, and I do not feel unsafe.
Yeah, no, and I think, like, again, the intentionality, I think that's what we all need. Because we don't have that. We can talk about it. Oh, I would love to go visit, like, North Nashville or West. I would love to go visit these places, but, if we're not intentional about it, or trying to, reach out and say, or just drive through, right? Ain't nothing gonna happen to you. Just drive through and just like try to interact with the things that are going on. And, because I know just growing up here, I thought everybody was Black.
Oh, I saw that on your Jamel episode,
You would think I thought because I was in my Black cultural bubble, and like a good friend of mine, like Steve Vinnick, he would have thought everybody was white, and we both born and raised in Nashville, right? But two different like just worlds, right? And like he never felt the need to cross over, and I never felt the need to cross over. But there needs to be more intentionality, so we can so we can get to know each other as a community and really know what's going on in our city. And speaking of what's going on in our city, because I know this is your field, mental health.
Yes.
And so I want to talk on that a little bit to kind of close us out and kind of figure out what is going on in the mental health world, especially around like policing and making sure our mental health community is getting the right support and not just being jailed for having a mental health disability.
Well, there are a couple of efforts. I think you're familiar with what the Mental Health Cooperative is doing. They're partnering with MNPD to go out on crisis calls as part of a crisis intervention team. We worked on that for years, and MNPD would not get on board with that. I think once we talked about not including MNPD, then they were willing to partner with the Mental Health Co-op on that. But again, not the ideal situation, especially in situations where there's literally no crime involved. You just have somebody in crisis. There's no reason for an officer to be there. And I think officers would say that they're not qualified to be there. If someone's not committing a crime, they don't need to be involved. Officers have said that to me before. So there's that. There is NOAA, which a group you and I have both worked with, are trying to work on a non-police response involving, mental health clinicians being sent out. But once again, that is not community-led and doesn't involve the credible messengers we talked about in terms of people that they know and trust, neighbors or, people from their church or what have you being involved. And I understand there's issues of being, embarrassed, having a mental health crisis. When I worked at the psychiatric hospital at Vanderbilt, I ran into somebody I knew through church. And I know she was very embarrassed by that. So I understand that. But I've been starting to work with the Nashville Community Crisis Response. And so we're working on a model that involves people in the community responding when there's a mental health crisis. And so, just starting to work through that and what that would look like and who would need to be involved. And really hearing, again, from the communities themselves that are most affected, such as the unhoused. That's just one example that comes to mind. who have a lot of interaction with the police due to mental health issues. So I really feel that that is a very, very important piece of, mental health care in this city.
Well, look, is there anything else you want to leave us with, Amanda? This has been great. This has been I couldn't ask for a better interview.
Oh, thank you so much. You're an
I-
excellent interviewer. That's
look,
all
I've
right.
enjoyed this. I really have. Pizza next time because we're gonna have. You
I
back.
was a little offended that I did not get pizza.
Well,
I'm gonna
look,
let it go,
look. I'm gonna make sure the next time because you're gonna be a recurring guest.
I am.
Yeah, because we need people like you to come and update us and see what's going on.
Okay.
And give it to us real, right? Because other news media and things outlets won't
Yeah.
let you speak how you
Yeah.
want to speak and what needs to be said, right? And what actually needs to be heard. So we're gonna definitely have you back. But also, I'm gonna make sure if, look, if people that don't know, she's from New England, Connecticut. They have a thing. They have a beef with this, deep dish and thin crust, and so we got to make sure we don't offend Amanda.
Deep dish is a lovely casserole, but it is not pizza.
Let's see, look, when you're a pizza lover like me, you don't discriminate. But if you're from the Northeast, it's a thing.
You know.
So it's a thing. So down south, we don't have a pizza
I'm from
thing.
New Haven,
Right.
Connecticut. I have to.
Let me before I close, let me break it down how serious pizza is right now. When I initially broached Amanda about the whole deep dish conversation thing and pizza, right? One, I think she was offended, right, that I will ask her to come on it's just the title, deep dish. That's all. I think she was offended by that. But she took it a step further to make sure she sent me the Forbes list of top pizza. And guess who's at the top? New Haven.
New Haven, Connecticut.
New Haven, Connecticut.
Yes,
And so this is a serious thing, people.
it
And so
is.
you see Amanda.
I'm
don't
sorry.
offend her with deep dish.
No.
We talking about pizza. I just had to get that out
No.
there. But I appreciate your time, Amanda.
Thank you so much
I
for
appreciate-
having me.
I appreciate what you do and what you stand for in the community, in your voice that you use to build community. I really do, and I hope people that's watching and listening to this reach out to Amanda. She's always willing
Please.
to talk
Anytime.
and open-minded, and not to admit when she was wrong,
Oh.
and reflective on just things. She's just an amazing person.
Aw,
And I
thank
really
you
mean
so
that.
much.
No, I really mean that.
Aw.
And yeah, I can't wait to have you back.
Well, right back at you. I am so thrilled with everything that you're doing. This has just been such a wonderful experience, and I'm just so glad to know you.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank
Till
you.
next time.
Okay.